Well, let's fix global warming. It's like, okay, well, good luck with that. It's the kind of low-resolution thinking that just gets us absolutely nowhere. And we're not going to do a damn thing about it either. It's like, you're going to stop using your iPhones? You're not going to do any of that.
In this video, we are going to watch Jordan Peterson absolutely tear shreds off of a Cambridge student's question about climate change. I believe that this is one of Jordan Peterson's finest moments, and it's an incredible distillation of all of the major problems with the climate narrative. And it also poses some better solutions. So with that, let's get into the clips.
So I was wondering whether you thought climate change could be an issue that could unite us all on left and right, moving us beyond debates about C16 to discussions at the UN at Katowice next month, where perhaps humanity might finally discover its global map of meaning.
No. I mean, there's a couple of reasons. I mean, the first reason is that I spent a lot of time reading. I worked for a UN committee for 2 years on sustainable economic and ecological development, and read a very large amount during that period of time and learned a lot, much of which made me much more optimistic than I had been before I read the relevant literature, which was a real shock to me. But the climate change issue is an absolutely catastrophic, nightmarish mess, and the idea that that will unite us is that's not going to unite us. I mean, first of all, it's very difficult to separate the science from the politics, and second, even if the claims, the more radical claims, are true, we have no idea what to do about it, and so no. And besides, it's even worse than that. Here's one of the worst things about the whole mess is...
Guys, if you like this content and if you're enjoying this channel, make sure you like the video and subscribe. I'm getting heavily targeted by YouTube, and all I can do at the moment is keep on making this daily content until I become absolutely undeniable. Your help is greatly appreciated.
The whole mess is... So as you project outwards with regards to your climate change projections, which are quite unreliable to begin with, and the unreliability of the measurement magnifies as you move forward in time, obviously, because the errors accumulate. And so if you go out 50 years, the error bars around the projections are already so wide that we won't be able to measure the positive or negative effects of anything we do right now. So how in the world are you going to solve a problem when you can't even measure the consequence of your actions? Like, how is that even possible? And besides that, well, what's the solution? What are we going to do? Switch to wind and solar? Well, good luck with that. Just try it and see what happens. We can't store the power. Germany tried it. They produced more carbon dioxide than they did when they started because they had to turn on their coal-fired plants again. That wasn't a very good plan. Well, we don't want nuclear. It's like, okay, what happens at night? The sun goes down. Well, isn't that something we should have taken into account? Oh, we got to flip on the coal-fired plants. Well, so it was a complete catastrophe, and all that happened was the price of electricity shot up. It was like zero utility. So that's not a solution.
This just makes too much sense when you think about it. And this epic rant, guys, has just begun. But let me focus on what he just said for a moment. You see, I watched this clip a few years ago, and I remember this being a real penny drop moment for me. Dr. Peterson explains the climate change issue here in a way that I've never seen done better. So let me try and break it down. Based on what we know at the moment, if we put certain measures in place, we would have a good idea of what would happen tomorrow, and then we would have a good idea of what would happen in a week's time. But as that time frame continues to go on, the likelihood of error becomes larger and larger. Now, think about how stupid it is to make world-altering changes now, thinking that your predictions will actually come to fruition in the year 2050. That's nearly 30 years away. Now think about how much the world has changed in the last 30 years. In 1993, there were only 130 websites in existence.
It comes with a 160 meg hard drive and 4 megabytes of memory.
You mean you can take a movie and they'll put it on the hard drive and you can show it back?
Yeah.
Oh, come on.
Yeah, there it is right here.
Furthermore, just to add to that, we don't actually know how much of this whole climate change issue is actually anthropogenic or created by humans. We also actually don't understand climate itself very well, considering how wrong all of the predictions have been in the past.
How dare you!
And just to think about all of the millions of factors that are involved with climate and that are involved with ecosystems, there is no way that we can understand the effects of the major changes to our way of life that are being posed, let alone the millions of different issues and byproducts that will come from those changes. But most of all, these predictions don't take into account, because it's impossible to take into account, the changes in technology that are going to occur over the next 30 years. They don't take into account human innovation and ingenuity and the ability for humans to be able to solve problems. Just imagine how different things will be in the year 2050. But these predictions that they're making and these massive changes that they're making are predicated upon the idea that in the year 2050, everything will be the same, and all of the measures that they put in place now will definitely come to fruition in 2050, and we can all just hold hands together and just run into a sunset of eternal bliss. These climate cultists want to play God, and when you think about how silly it is, it all starts to unravel very quickly. Now on to some more incredible points raised by Dr. Peterson.
So what are we going to do about it? Well, we should cut back. We can't consume as much as we are all consuming. It's like, well, maybe, except the data that I've read indicate that if you can get the GDP of people up to about $5,000 a year, then they start caring about the environment, and the environment cleans up. So you could make a perfectly strong case, I think, and a reasonable one, perhaps even a humane one, that the actual idea would be to get everybody in the world who's poor, desperately so, out of poverty as fast as possible, which would increase consumption in the short term, because then they'd start to care about the environment and things would clean up. It's like, okay, well, what are we going to do about global warming? Well, good luck figuring that out. I don't see a solution on the horizon. I look at Bjorn Lomborg's work. I really like Bjorn Lomborg. I think he's a real genius. You can look him up if you want. He took the UN millennial goals. There's 200 of them. That's way too many goals if you're serious about goals, by the way, because 200 goals isn't a plan. It's a wish list. You have to prioritize. I'm serious. You have to prioritize. But they won't prioritize because each of the goals has its constituents. And if you prioritize, then you irritate the constituents. But if you don't prioritize, then you can't implement the plan. So what Lomborg did was gather a teams of economists, multiple teams, some of whom were Nobel Prize-winning economists. He had them assemble teams. He had them rank order development goals in terms of their return on investment, all of the teams. Then he averaged across the teams and came up with a final list. And addressing global warming wasn't even on the list. The most fundamental, he wrote a book called How to Spend $75 Billion to Make the World a Better Place, and that's not very much money on a global scale. Almost everything that he recommended had to do with increased child nutrition in developing countries. It's like, these things are complicated, man. These are complicated. It's like, well, let's fix global warming. It's like, okay, well, good luck with that. First of all, how are you going to do that? And to think that will unite us, well, certainly not uniting us so far. So, no. And it's the kind of low-resolution thinking that just gets us absolutely nowhere. I like what Lomborg did way better. I think it's way more intelligent. So, you know, maybe if you increase child nutrition enough and you produce another, I don't know, 10 million geniuses as a consequence of that, and maybe one of them will figure out what to do about global warming. Well, I'm serious about that, you know?
Boom. Dr. Peterson just touched something there that they don't want you to know. Developing nations are the ones that suffer the most from rising energy prices. Yet the climate cultists have the audacity to say that they're doing what they're doing as a means of protecting the vulnerable. Yeah, right.
How dare you!
We have seen incredible miracles happen over the past 100 years in terms of poor countries raising their GDPs and their standard of living. This is through the adoption of free markets and access to clean drinking water, people having enough calories to survive, and also cheap and abundant energy. I was recently in South Korea, and I'll be releasing some videos soon about my experiences there. But South Korea is a country that in the 1950s was dirt poor. Now you walk around Seoul and it's like a highly developed, advanced first world nation. And just for some more good news, These miracles that happened in Taiwan and Singapore and South Korea and China are being replicated in Africa. Hindered though by the pandemic. Check out the development of countries such as Nigeria, Kenya, Rwanda and Cote d'Ivoire. These countries are becoming tech and manufacturing hubs. But this development is completely and utterly dependent on access to cheap and abundant energy. Without this, and if the net zero cultists have their way, these countries will go backwards. Make no mistake, the poorest people in the world will be sacrificed at the altar of climate change.
How dare you?
And worse yet, you'll never hear about that because you know what they'll blame these famines on, and you know what they'll blame the lowering in GDP on? You guessed it, climate change. So that begs the question then, who are they trying to save here? When they talk about saving the planet will be fine. Once we're gone, the natural elements will swallow and absorb and disintegrate every trace of our existence within a few thousand years, and it will be like we were never even here. And all of the resources that we borrowed will be restored. So in my view, it's very naive to think that we're going to destroy the planet. The planet is much more likely to destroy us. Are they trying to save human life? Well, I've just explained why that's a non-argument and why it'll actually have the counter effect. So what is going on here? I'll leave it to you guys to discuss in the comments.
It's not a bad thing to increase the total sum of human brain power, you know? And so we treat these things so lightly. Well, let's fix the planet. Well, we're going to concentrate on global warming. Well, why global warming? Well, because everyone thinks that's the biggest catastrophe. Well, maybe it is, but if you don't have a solution, well, and then what about all those other problems? What are you going to do about them? Well, we'll ignore them because we can feel good about, you know, being concerned about global warming. It's like, you know, one of the reasons there's more trees in the Northern Hemisphere than there were 100 years ago. No one knows that, but it's true, and by a substantial margin. You know why, in part? Because people burned coal instead of wood. It's like everyone says, well, we shouldn't burn coal. It's like, okay, fair enough. What do you want to do, burn trees instead? Because that's what poor people would have done. It's like, coal isn't good. Well, it's better than burning wood. So these things are complicated. So they're unbelievably complicated. And so, no, it's not going to unite us. And we're not going to do a damn thing about it either. So it doesn't really matter. So, well, what are we going to do? You're going to stop, like, having heat? You're going to stop having electricity? You're going to stop driving your cars? You're going to stop taking trains? It's like, you're going to stop using your iPhones? You're not going to do any of that. And no wonder. So, no.
Thank you for that.
Spot on. And I love the fact that this speech was done in front of a bunch of university students as well. They would be no doubt having a mental jiu-jitsu match with themselves, trying their hardest to combat the absolute facts and pure fire that Dr. Peterson just spat. And what he said is true. If you want to do the net zero thing, then you'll have to give up your phones, you'll have to give up your cars, you'll have to give up traveling the world, and everything else that you've come to love for that matter. Everything relies on energy. The world revolves around energy, and without it, this whole ship sinks. So like always, guys, hit those links in the bio if you want to come find me, send me an email, leave a comment, like, subscribe, all of that good stuff. And if you guys want to watch another video, click right here. Until next time, I'm Jake. This is Rattlesnake TV, keeping you armed and dangerous.